Hey, so if you've ever wondered how to mix up pastels using watercolors, I am going to show you how to do that today in this video. All right, so let me show you how I make pastel colors using my watercolors. It's actually really simple, and it might be more simple than you even think it is. And so if you're just starting with watercolors, it probably seems counterintuitive because painting with pastels means usually that you add like a white paint to your colors in order to make pastels. But with watercolors, you just add more water. And I know that sounds really simple, but basically that's what it is. And I will show you how that works. So I'm going to just use a Quin Rose that I have in my palette. And I'm first going to paint it in a very concentrated kind of swatch here. And so this is your pure pigment that came out of the tube. And so it's obviously a magenta. So if you wanted to make a pink, all you would do is add more water. So the essence of making pastels in watercolors is basically diluting your paint down. So it's a lot of water and very, very little paint at different degrees. So depending on how light you want your pastel color. And so I'm just adding a bunch of water to my palette and not adding any more paint to my brush. And so I'm just diluting the color that was already on my brush. And if I paint another swatch next to this original one, you'll see that it's just a lot lighter and it is a pastel version of the same color that's here. And so this goes for any color that you have on your palette. So if I did this again with a Pyrrol Scarlet, which I have in my palette, and then I paint a very diluted or very concentrated swatch here, and then I dilute this color down, it's gonna make a really pretty coral. And this is kind of one of my favorite ways to like dilute down this color, is to make it this pretty coral color. So you can see that just depending on how much water you add is how pastel your color gets. So I'll do one more, and one that I really like is like a sea green color. And so I found over time that if you don't want to mix up your own kind of green, sea green, you can use straight from the tube something like a phthalo green, which is what I have here. And if I just paint this as a really saturated swatch, so you can see what that looks like. And then I take water and I dilute it down. Let's just make another puddle here. And I just add a lot of water to this. I can make a really pretty kind of sea green. If I add even more water to this, it'll become even lighter. So I could even go a little bit lighter here. And so you can just see that the more water that you add, so if I like pick this up and I made this very light and subtle, you could actually end up with a really pretty, just a light sea foam green color. And so basically with watercolors, if you add water to your paint, so basically it's almost like 1% paint and a ton of water, then you're gonna get pastel colors, no matter what color you start with from your palette. So I just want to show you like a comparison if you were to use white paint, because the rule is not that you can't use white paint in watercolors, but it's sort of a basic rule of thumb. So you don't really use white paint in watercolors if you didn't already know, but it's not that you can't. So I have a tube of white gouache here, and I'm going to mix the white gouache with some of my paint. And gouache, if you don't already know, is like a concentrated version of watercolor. So basically, if you add water to white gouache or any kind of gouache, it'll become diluted and it'll act a lot like watercolors. So that's why I'm starting with that base. So if I just turn this so you can see, I squeeze out a little bit of white gouache onto my palette right here. And I'm going to mix this with phthalo green, and then we're going to compare and see what that looks like. So if I just take this white gouache and I mix up a pastel, which is more of your traditional way of thinking about pastels, by mixing white into a color, and I paint it onto here as a very saturated swatch, you can see that the difference is that you're going to get a much more chalky version of your pastel. It's still pretty, and it doesn't mean that you can't use it. And I want to show you if I dilute this with water, it actually will become less chalky because there's so much water in it. And then you'll still get a really nice, pretty light pastel here. So the thing is if you paint a lot with this, or if you're painting a whole like painting with this, you might get more of a different effect than using just pure watercolors, because you're using this white paint or white gouache, or maybe you have white watercolors that basically turns your pigments or your paints into something that's more chalky and more opaque versus being transparent, which is a lot of the reason why people use watercolors is because they're transparent. So you're losing a little bit of that quality that's very unique to watercolors. So just keep that in mind if you do decide to mix pastels by using white gouache or white watercolor paint. So again, it's not something that you can't do, but I personally prefer to just dilute down my paint in order to get pastel colors versus mixing in a white paint into them. So basically that's how you get pastels in watercolors, and it's really easy, and it might sound a little bit more simple than you thought it would be, but that's really all there is to it. Hey, I'm Susan, and I'm the person behind Ray and Lily. I really enjoy helping people that are just starting with watercolors build their confidence and a foundation painting so that they can keep on creating for themselves and just enjoy the process and not get discouraged. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit subscribe and check out the website and my blog for more watercolor resources. Thanks for watching.